All right, welcome back to the Sooner Surge, and less than 48 hours from kickoff for OU Cincinnati on Saturday. We're joined by a special guest today, Anthony Mazzini, joins us to preview the game and the matchup. And Anthony, first Big 12 game for both teams this year, first Big 12 game for Cincinnati in general, and Big Noon Kickoff, everything that's surrounding this game. What's the excitement level there in Cincinnati, the atmosphere?
Yeah, it's really incredible. Obviously, the whole year has been very exciting for Cincinnati. It's been a long time coming. What a lot of people don't realize is the jump to the Big 12 was years and years and years before even the last couple of years when you started hearing the noise that Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, and UCF were going to the Big 12. This started years and years and years ago. So now to finally have this come to fruition is a big deal for the campus, a big deal for the community to have a Power 5 program. On the football side, the last couple of years they had been playing like a Power 5 program, going to the college football playoff a couple of seasons ago, back-to-back New Year's Six bowls when they playing against Georgia a couple of years ago. So the excitement is fantastic, really from the start of the season until this point, and it's only continuing to grow. Very excited to have Fox be coming to town to do their Fox game day here in Cincinnati. The ESPN game day came out a couple of years ago and previewed that match against Tulsa. Now Cincinnati has it again on Fox this time around. So, man, oh man, just, want to talk about excitement. The place is going to be packed. They've sold out Nippert Stadium again. I believe it's 14 consecutive sellouts now. But I have to imagine that this was probably the hottest ticket of those 14 sellouts. If I had to guess, when you factor in a blue blood with Oklahoma coming to town, you factor in a top 25 Oklahoma team, one that was down a little bit last year, but now they're back to where they expect to be as a program. And obviously the first Big 12 game for Cincinnati, for Oklahoma as well. But, for Cincinnati being the first, having their first Big 12 game, this one's big here.
Yeah, Cincinnati last week was upset by Miami, Ohio at home. How do you expect the Bearcats to bounce back this week against Oklahoma?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a tricky situation, right? Because you expect them to bounce back, but you're also playing Oklahoma, a team with one of the best offenses, a team with one of the best defensive minds with, Brent Venables coming over from Clemson a couple of years ago. So this is a different challenge, and I'm sure it's one that Scott Satterfield and the Bearcats recognize that, you don't want to call any team in the non-conference a cakewalk because they weren't. You look at Cincinnati's non-conference schedule. Yeah, Eastern Kentucky, you're expected to win that game, and they did what they needed to do. You go on the road at Pittsburgh, and granted, I know we're a couple of years away from the Jordan Addisons and the Kenny Pickett's now, but that's still on an ACC team's home field. That's a big game. You win that one. And then you lose the Victory Bell game against Miami. But like Scott Satterfield said in his press conference before that one, you're getting that team's best shot every time those two teams play. So, yes, it was an upset, but it's kind of, I don't want to say an understandable upset, but it's one that, that's a rivalry game. Those things happen from time to time. So to get back to your original question, how do you bounce back? It's tough, man. Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback's a Heisman candidate right now. He's playing absolutely phenomenal. You need to be better in the red zone if you're Cincinnati. They got there a couple of times. Corey Kiner scored early, the running back, the transfer from LSU a couple of years ago. Then they kind of went silent. Emory Jones needs to be a little bit better. He was fantastic against Pittsburgh. He was fantastic against Eastern Kentucky. Took a little bit of a step back against Miami, Ohio. Maybe that rivalry situation got to him a little bit there. But the offense certainly needs to be better. They need to keep pace with Oklahoma, a team that's one of the top offensive teams in the country. They need to navigate past what is a really good defense. So, how do they bounce back? It's a tough question, man, because you're facing Oklahoma. There's a lot of hype. You got to ride that crowd. The defense has been really good. One of the nation's leaders in sacks. They're holding opposing quarterbacks to less than 50% completion percentage over the course of the season. So the defense has been good, but the offense certainly needs to be better to keep pace with Oklahoma. They need to ride that crowd as well.
Yeah, Anthony, as far as Emory Jones, just kind of your thoughts on him through 3 games. Obviously, dual threat. We know OU and a lot of teams struggle with dual threat quarterbacks. But like you said, the consistency maybe. Just tell us about Emory Jones through 3 games, kind of what you're seeing.
Yeah, Emory, for people that aren't aware, Florida originally and then Arizona State. So he's on his 3rd school, but this is a guy that had a lot of success at Florida. Arizona State, he admitted it, just wasn't probably the right fit for him. So he's on his third school here at Cincinnati. He replaces Ben Bryant from last year, who's now playing at Northwestern. Bryant was very good in his own right, but obviously when you have coaching change, the style of offense changes a little bit with Brad Glenn and Scott Satterfield running the show here in Cincinnati now. So he was great against Eastern Kentucky. Had a bunch of touchdowns in that first half with his legs, with his arm. The guy can really do it all. Went on the road at Pittsburgh, played very well in that game. But certainly a dual threat guy, as you mentioned, a guy that can beat you with his legs. He can beat you with his arm. Like I said, just struggled, made some mistakes in that game against Miami, Ohio, threw the pick late in the game in overtime when they were trying to tie it. Miami scored first, and Cincinnati tried to tie it, and Jones threw the interception at the end of that game. So he needs to be better. It's small sample size, right? Everyone is, privy to a down game. But based on, the recency bias, based on what we saw in that last game against Miami, Ohio, he needs to be better generating offense, both with him and the players around him, the playmakers, at doing better in the red zone. You cannot settle for field goals. You cannot settle for a sack and get you out of field goal range, especially against a team like Oklahoma that's going to put a bunch of points on the board. So needs to be better generating offense. They only went 5 of 8, I believe, in the red zone in that last game against Miami, Ohio. And a lot of those were field goals down the stretch there in that game. So need to be better in the red zone. But it's not just Emory Jones. The running backs have been good this season. Corey Kiner and Montgomery have been very good. One of his old teammates at Florida, Henderson, one of the top receivers in the nation right now, averaging just shy of 100 yards per game. He came over from Florida this past offseason as part of the portal. And then you have D. Wiggins, who's a transfer from Miami as well, an ACC team. So obviously, like any team, the spotlight goes to the quarterback, right? But those playmakers around him have been playing well, and they need to play well again.
Yeah, you mentioned Xavier Henderson. He's averaging about 15 yards per reception right now. What are your expectations? I would assume he's going to be lining up against Woody Washington for the Sooners, kind of the veteran leader that the Sooners have in the secondary. So what are your expectations for that match?
Yeah, again, it's one of those ones where everybody knows what Henderson can do, and everybody knows what this Oklahoma defense can do. So if you're Oklahoma, you're keying in on who is the best target right now for Cincinnati, and that has been Henderson in the early part of the season. Does that open up opportunities for D. Wiggins? That's certainly an option. He's certainly capable. I'm from New England. I'm a Patriots fan, so I always think of what Bill Belichick used to do when he would kind of have the number 2 cornerback for his defense, basically have a double team, sort of say you have the corner, the number 2 corner for your team, take the number 1 receiver, but then you have safety help over the top, and you put your number 1 cornerback on the team's number 2 receiver, and then you kind of have that one-on-one matchup out there. So granted, the Patriots haven't been very good offensively in a while, but the defense is still pretty good. So if I'm Oklahoma, maybe they try something like that. Maybe they try the number 2 corner on Henderson with safety help over the top. They put their number 1 corner on a guy like Wiggins. There's certainly, ways that you can navigate, taking away a number 1 receiver. But the fact of the matter is Jones is going to look for his top guy. If he's under pressure at all, if the offensive line starts to crater a little bit, who's he going to look for? It's going to be his number 1 option, Henderson. So even if the defense is good, which I think Cincinnati expects it, I expect it to be good for Oklahoma, that's still your fallback option. That's still your go-to guy. I wouldn't expect a T. Higgins shutout situation like the Bengals had a couple of games ago. I think Higgins is going to, Henderson is still going to have some catches. Is it going to be a gaudy 15 yards per reception game? Who knows? But that's still a guy that Emory Jones is going to be looking for. But like you said, that's going to be a fantastic matchup to watch.
Yeah, and obviously a big matchup's Dylan Gabriel against the secondary there of Cincinnati. Dylan Gabriel's been playing very well. Just kind of give us a little bit thoughts on the secondary with Cincinnati.
The secondary's been good the last couple of years, man. We've talked a lot about the offense. Cincinnati only returned 1 offensive starter, and that was an offensive lineman. They really had to retool offensively. But Cincinnati's, secondary the last couple of years, it's kind of become DBU, which I don't want to put that label, so don't quote me on that yet. But, you look at the track record. Kobe Bryant was a high draft pick. Sauce Gardner was a high draft pick, rookie of the year for the Jets last year in the NFL. who, by the way, good for him, just came back to graduate this past offseason. So good for Sauce there. I want to give him a little plug for that. But the secondary has been fantastic. And it's not just the secondary, because the secondary is only as good as that defensive line getting to the quarterback as well. The last couple of seasons under a Brian Brown defense, the defensive coordinator for Cincinnati, Louisville got to the quarterback a ton. Cincinnati is doing that again this season under Brian Brown, and they return a ton from that defensive line as well. You had Malik Van, you have Dante Corleone, Jawan Briggs. So that alleviates a lot of pressure on your secondary as well. So in terms of Dylan Gabriel, you need to get to him, get him out of the pocket, get him out of his comfort zone. A guy that has a very, very high completion percentage this season. I believe he leads the nation in completion percentage. And if he doesn't, it's certainly right around the tops in the country. So you need to get to him, make him feel uncomfortable, even if it's not a sack, just, hit him a little bit. Obviously you don't want the late penalties, the things like that, but make him uncomfortable, get to the quarterback, because that's going to alleviate the pressure on that secondary as well. And we know Oklahoma certainly has talented receivers. They're putting up big numbers themselves. So this is certainly a secondary that's very good. They return more pieces from the secondary than they did offensively. But I think it starts with that defensive line. You need to get to the quarterback. You need to get Gabriel out of his comfort zone. If you do that, like any quarterback, Gabriel's not immune to his mistakes. If he's throwing on the run and one sails on him a little bit, next thing you know, the safety comes in and you get a pick. So I think, the secondary, very good. They return a lot of pieces there. But it starts with that defensive line. It starts with those linebackers. They need to get to the quarterback. They need to make Gabriel uncomfortable and get him out of the pocket.
Yeah, you mentioned the defensive line. The theme of the week for Oklahoma has been battle of the trenches. It's going to be battle of the trenches for both sides of the ball. So kind of talk about the Cincinnati defensive line and then the Cincinnati offensive line against Oklahoma run defense that's one of the best in the country.
Yeah, we'll start with the defensive line. I mean, I mentioned a couple of those guys, but, Jawan Briggs, a guy that's been there for a long time now, made the transition from as an original recruit to Virginia, came over to Cincinnati. He was a part of those back-to-back New Year's Six teams, went to the college football playoff, played against Alabama. This guy, and a fantastic guy as well. You're talking about a guy that has a couple of kids, working through his studies, just an overall fantastic guy. One of the best guys that I've had a chance to speak to on that team, handles the media very, very well, always in a positive mindset. But, the football stuff, obviously, in terms of this matchup, extremely talented, extremely physical. Probably the best guy on that defensive line in terms of pure skill is Dante Corleone. They call him the Godfather. Top-rated defensive lineman according to PFF last season, All-American. Just so physical. Brian Brown, I had a chance to speak with him during spring practice, and he was just amazed at the luxury of riches that he had coming back on that defensive line. We were talking, and it's like, look, at Louisville, we were one of the top defensive teams in the country in terms of getting to the quarterback. Now I come to Cincinnati, and usually with coaching change, there's a lot of turnover. We've talked about that for the offense. The defense stayed mostly intact. And he's saying to himself, man, I inherit the top defensive lineman according to PFF's ratings. I mean, for a defensive coach, for a team that led the country in sacks, or one of the top leaders in sacks over the last couple of years at Louisville, you can't ask for anything more as a coach. So just those two right there. There are others that I could name as well, but Corleone and Briggs are the two guys to watch on that defensive line. Gavin Gerhardt was the only offensive starter that I mentioned that returned. He's an offensive lineman for Cincinnati. But they had to regroup that entire offensive line. Gerhardt was the only starter that returned. They've had a lot of turnover offensively, and obviously the offensive line came in as a bit of an unknown. I'd say they handled themselves pretty well. Kiner has had some big rushing games this season. He had a big long run against Pittsburgh a couple of games ago, and then he started off well against Miami, Ohio in that last meeting. So the offensive line, I'd say so far, has exceeded expectations. Granted, you've had a whole spring practice season and you had all off season to gel and form, but that's always a concern, right? When you come in with 4 new starters on an offensive line, who's going to play where, who's going to protect your quarterback at that left tackle position? How are you going to gel? How are your motions? All that kind of stuff. Are you committing a lot of penalties early because you're out of sync? So I'd say the offensive line has been a pleasant surprise so far, considering all the movement, considering all the change. But Cincinnati's strength in terms of the trenches, quote unquote, certainly resides on that defensive line.
Yeah, Anthony, just last question for you. Kind of a combo question. Two keys, in your opinion, for an upset for Cincinnati beat Oklahoma. What are the two most important? And then what's a good restaurant for all these Sooner fans that come up here?
Say that second part again. You cut out a little bit there on me.
Just a good restaurant for the Sooner fans that come up there for the game.
A good restaurant. Oh, you're right up my alley there. I do summer baseball as well, and I like to go on Twitter and every time I'm in a city, tell the people where I ate and stuff like that. So I'm going to think about that one for a minute because that's a good one. In terms of a couple of keys, I think it kind of goes to a couple of things we already talked about. And we'll start with the defense. It's going to get to the quarterback. You need to make Gabriel uncomfortable. For a guy that completes so many passes, for an offense that has been so explosive with so many playmakers, you need to get him out of his comfort zone. Again, it might not always be a sack. It might just be a hit as he's throwing the ball, just something that he knows that pressure is coming and it's going to continue to come. He cannot sit in that pocket and have 4, 5, 6 seconds to throw to his receivers downfield. Cincinnati's secondary is good, but I think they're going to realize that, hey, we're not playing Miami, Ohio anymore. We're not playing Eastern Kentucky. Now, they showed that against Pittsburgh. Again, it's a different Pittsburgh team from the one that we've seen a couple of years ago with the Pickett's and the Addisons, and the list goes on and on when Pittsburgh was, ACC champions a couple of years ago. But that's still a good win for Cincinnati. They've shown that they can play against some of the top dogs in the country, but Oklahoma's a different animal, man. So I think you need to get to Gabriel. And then, like I said earlier, Jones and the offense in general need to be better in the red zone. You might get to the 25, 30-yard line, but you need to, progress. You need to get into the end zone. Against a high-powered Oklahoma offense, you cannot settle for field goals. You need to score touchdowns, and you need to be better in the red zone offensively. And I think a third as well. I know you only asked for 2, but I'm going to give you 3. I give 110%. I think you need to maintain composure, calm yourself. There's a lot of hype going into this game, right? Mm-hmm. You want to feed off the crowd, but you cannot come out too hyped that, you commit that early false start penalty and you back yourself up 5 yards right from the get-go. You want to come out hyped up and jolted and whatever other adjectives you want to use, but you cannot let it be a detriment. You cannot let the insane amount of hype and the crowd and everything that goes with it, you need to use that to your advantage. You cannot let that overtake you. So I think those are my 3 keys. And I don't have any doubt Cincinnati's played in packed houses before. A lot of the guys they brought in have come from big programs. I mean, Corey Kiner played at LSU down in Baton Rouge. That's one of the best college atmospheres in the country. So I don't have any doubts with that, but it's just something that came into my mind that they need to rein that in and use that to their advantage. In terms of a restaurant, man, there are a lot of good ones here in Cincinnati. If you're looking for pizza, if you're looking for someplace right around campus, my personal favorite is Martino's. I think they have some of the best pizza in town. It's right over on Short Vine. Mio's is over there as well. Over right off of Calhoun Street is a place called Adriatico's. A lot of people will tell you that's their favorite pizza in town. I prefer Martino's, but Adriatico's is a good spot. If you're looking for downtown stuff, if you're looking to spend a little bit of money, Jeff Ruby's Steakhouse is a really good spot. That's one of the top steakhouses around here. Soto is another really good place. That's more of an Italian spot. But you got to try Skyline Chili. If you're an Oklahoma fan and you're coming out, you got to try Skyline. I actually just had some friends in town visiting from Massachusetts, where I'm from originally, and I took them to Skyline, and they did like it. It seemed, I'm a proud Italian. It's kind of a sin when you're putting chili and onions and beans on pasta, but I've come around to it, man. It is very good. So those are a couple. If you're looking for your bar food and stuff like that, the pizza, I'd go check out Martino's or Adriatico's or Mio's. But if you're looking for something Cincinnati local, you got to check out a Skyline. There are a few over near campus and a few downtown as well. So check out the Skyline, get one of the ways. And, I can't guarantee that you'll like it, but I know my friends just did. And I've certainly come a long way from, the pasta and meatballs to now liking chili on my noodles. So it is pretty good.
Nice. Well, there you have it, Sooner fans. Anthony, thanks so much for joining. Really appreciate you taking time, man. And looking forward to Saturday.
Yeah, it should be a great atmosphere, guys. Thank you for having me. If you need anything else, let me know.
All right. Appreciate it.